Thank you all for attending the importance of Carnosol, a new FD treatment. We have many people signed on from all corners of the FD community, so a heartfelt welcome to all of you. I am Ann Slaw, president of Familial Dysautonomia Now Foundation, also known as FD Now, and mom to Andrew, age 30, with FD. FD Now's focus is to find better treatments and a cure for FD with speed and urgency. To that end, we are proud to fund the research of Doctors Rubin and Anderson, co-directors at the Laboratory for Familial Dysautonomia Research at Fordham University, New York, USA, who have discovered 13 new treatments in the past 19 years. The hallmark of these treatments is that they are safe, immediate, effective, affordable, and accessible. We have a lot of exciting things to learn this afternoon from our two esteemed researchers who promise not to be too sciencey. And before I turn over the talk to them both, we just have a few housekeeping details. First, you'll notice everyone's mics are muted and cameras are turned off. This is intentional to keep the focus on our speakers today. Please reach out to Sherry White, our FD Now office manager, at info@fdnow.org if you are having any type of technical issues, or you can throw something in the Q&A box. Next, as a general rule, all of your questions will be held to the end of the talk, which will be about 40 to 50 minutes. However, if you have questions, just feel free to just pop those into the question box. Dr. Anderson will be keeping a running list of your questions for Dr. Rubin to answer at the end. Next, if you miss anything and you want to re-listen, we are recording this webinar and we will be uploading that to our website. Next, if you have a highly specific question, you can contact Dr. Rubin directly at rubin@fordham.edu. That is rubin@fordham.edu. Lastly, we may email you in the coming days to get your feedback on the event. And now it is my pleasure to turn it over to Dr. Rubin.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, or whatever time it is, where it is that you are at this very moment. So let me start at the beginning. And the beginning starts really with FD Now. FD Now has supported the research that's been going on in the lab for nearly 20 years. If it were not for FD Now, none of these discoveries that I will be talking to you about today would have occurred. And so I have a great debt of gratitude for their ongoing efforts, their tireless ongoing efforts that have really made a difference in the lives of hundreds of individuals with familial dysautonomia. FD Now has a variety of different events that they host in order to generate the funds that keeps the lab going. I do want to point out that the philosophy that FD Now ascribes to is one that comes from the Ethics of the Fathers in chapter 1, verse 14. It says, "He would also say, if I am not for myself, who is for me? And if I am not for myself, what am I? And finally, and if not now, when?" And the now issue is of paramount importance to the FD Now directors, as now makes a difference, and the translation of what it is that we find in the lab needs to occur as soon as possible, as in now. I also want to acknowledge the efforts of the people who put together the David Z. Herman Memorial Dinner each year. This is a very effective, fun fundraising event that occurs each year, and it is done in honor of the memory of David Z. Herman, who has a granddaughter with familial dysautonomia. So let's start at the beginning. In 2001, Dr. Anderson and I, as well as others in the lab, published a paper which described the mutation that causes familial dysautonomia. The gene at that point was named ICAP. It has gone through various name changes. It is now generally referred to as ELP1. So if I refer to it as ICAP or ELP1, you will know that I'm talking about the gene in which the mutation occurs that causes familial dysautonomia. For you to appreciate what it is that the rosemary extract is doing, or the carnosol therein, I need to give you some background information. So here we go. So the mutation that causes familial dysautonomia occurs in this ELP1 gene, and the gene structure is such that the information contained in the gene is located in different exons, and it is the responsibility of the cell to stitch the different exons together in such a manner so that exon 19 is next to exon 20, which is next to exon 21. In order for the cellular machinery to be able to know to stitch these together, there are certain signals that are adjacent to each of the exons, which direct the process so that it occurs properly. And so what I've shown you here is the sequence that is present in a normal individual, which is this GTAAGT, which is the sequence that dictates that the splicing occurs like such, so that exon 19 is connected to exon 20 and exon 20 is connected to 21, and all is well. Just as a frame of reference and as something that I'll refer to as we go through the talk to help this information to be transmitted effectively, the size of exon 19 is 116, so exon 20 is 74, and this is exon 21 is 79. So if we do the math and simply add up 116, 74, and 79, we find out that that is a total distance of 269. And when we analyze the material in the laboratory that is generated in individuals that do not carry the FD mutation, or in cells of individuals who do not carry the FD mutation, you find that it is in fact 269 base pairs, or 269 in length. In individuals that have familial dysautonomia, there is a mutation which is occurring where the sequence, which is in the normal GTAAGT, is now GTAAGC. So this single base is what causes familial dysautonomia, and this single base causes the following to occur. Instead of you getting the stitching together of 19 to 20 to 21, you get a skipping of 20 so that you have 19 going directly to 21. What that results in is a missing of this 74, the exon 20, which is 74 base pair, is missing from the product. And because it's missing from the product, this is a non-functional product that is produced. So this is a non-functional product. But interestingly enough, and this is why we have been successful in individuals who have familial dysautonomia and in cells from individuals who have familial dysautonomia, some of the correct splicing does in fact occur where you get 19 to 20 to 21. And so what happens when you get that is you get the same 269 base pair product that you get from the normal. And this can be seen as we analyze it. You can see the 269, which is the normal functional product, and you can see the 195, which is the non-functional product. And actually, what you can see here is that 80% of the material that is produced in these cells is non-functional, and 20% of the material is functional. This is just another way of depicting this. Again, a frame of reference that will allow you to follow the talk all the way through. So this is the normal splicing process where you have the T in this spot. You have the normal splicing or stitching together of 19, 20, 21, 19, 20, and 21, and you get the normal full-length functional product, which we said before is 269 base pairs in length. This contrasts with what happens in familial dysautonomia. When there's a C in this position, you get the aberrant splicing, which takes you from 19 to 21, skipping the 74 of exon 20. And then you also get some normal splicing, which occurs. So you get two products, as we saw before. You get 19, 20, 21, which is the functional product, and you get 19 to 21, which is non-functional, or as we might call it, truncated. So these red figures represent the non-functional product, and the green ones are the ones that are functional. And the relative ratio is about 20% of them will be functional and 80% of them will be non-functional. So that gives you the background information that you will need for the remainder of this talk. Again, one is 269, the full length, or the functional one is 269 in length, and the non-functional is 195 in length. This is a picture of Dr. Anderson, who has worked tirelessly on helping those with familial dysautonomia this entire period of time. And what you see here is Dr. Anderson is attempting to push the truncated ones into the full-length ones so that the children with familial dysautonomia can live better lives. Now, actually, she's not able to push it with her hands, but the question was, can she push it using scientific methods to push more of the red truncated ones into the category of the green functional ones? So this is just the same picture again, because I want to expand on this. So this is the same picture you saw a moment ago. And in fact, she was successful. She has been able to identify, this is a paper which appeared in 2003, which demonstrated that EGCG, which is epigallocatechin gallate, which is a molecule which is present in green tea, corrects the aberrant splicing of the ICAP, or now we refer to it ELP1 mRNA, in cells from patients with familial dysautonomia. And now let me show you what this actually does. So this is the picture that you used to. We have the 269, which is the functional, and the 195, which is not functional. And when she treats the cells with EGCG, what you can see is that there is a shift up from the lower 195 non-functional to the 269, which is functional. And this was a very dramatic and effective approach to changing the splicing and increasing the amount of the functional product. It also told us that the strategy that we were working on was in fact capable of doing what we hoped it would do. And so now if you look at this picture, before, if you look on this side, what you can see is that you got 20% of the full length or the functional, and you had 80% of the truncated. What happened here is that there's 60% being made, which is properly made, which is functional, and only 40% of it is non-functional. So this was a dramatic observation, and one that has helped the FD community over the years. And in order to get the EGCG, the FD community is taking this product, which we test on a regular basis, which is green tea 70, which is standardized to the amount of EGCG in it. And this is the product that we recommend. There's actually another approach by which we can increase the amount of the functional ELP1 that's being made. And so I just want to show you this picture again. And this is a very simple way of looking at this. And what we have here is, again, the same picture where you have 20% of the material is full length and 80% of it is truncated and non-functional. And the question is that how many ELP1 molecules are being made, and there are actually a total of 10 molecules that are being made. But the question is how many of them are functional, how many of them are green, if that's how you're keeping track of it, and there are 2 of them that are green. And so this system is producing these pieces or the products at a 1x rate. So this is the normal rate in which this gene is being produced in a cell. And so what we wondered is whether we could ramp up the rate at which it would be produced in the cell to 3-fold. What would this do? This would do as follows. We would still have the same ratio of the full length to the truncated, but we would make much more of the full length, which would provide a health benefit for those with familial dysautonomia. So the question is how, if we could rank up the production to 3 times, then we would have 6 molecules which would be produced, which would provide a health benefit for those with familial dysautonomia. In fact, this is what occurred when we treated cells with tocotrienols. Again, this was published in 2003, and this became a very significant part of the therapeutic protocol for those with familial dysautonomia. And this is the product that is currently being used. It is standardized by us on a regular basis. And it, again, has helped those with familial dysautonomia through their lives and has actually transformed the lives of those with familial dysautonomia. It was interesting, as I was putting this talk together, I found this piece of information that in 1958, it was reported, it was a detailed description of the symptoms and the prognosis of those with FD. He stated about 1/5 of all those recorded cases have died, some in the first year of life, others in childhood. This is no longer the case, thankfully. The individuals who are taking the tocotrienols and green tea are living full and healthy lives. So that is, and in general, the health of those with familial dysautonomia has improved by the new medications that have been used for these individuals. So that's no longer on this list. But it was interesting to see that one of the items that he included is this motor performance is extremely handicapped by incoordination and development is therefore retarded. And so we have over the years seen a transformation in those with familial dysautonomia who have been taking the green tea and the tocotrienols. And I was recently had the opportunity to run across this picture. This is a picture of somebody with familial dysautonomia doing some very finely coordinated activities in a park in Rockland County. So clearly coordination is no longer an issue for this individual who has familial dysautonomia. So we have taken that now off the list. So why are we here today? We're here today to discuss the new observation with regards to Carnosol. This is a publication that came out just recently. Actually, it's in the process of coming out. It is a very large paper, a very scientific paper. I'm not going to go into all the science behind it. It is, I think the paper is something like 18 pages long, and it must have about 60 figures in it. I will spare you that. It was published in an Oxford press. It is a very, very prestigious journal of human molecular genetics. And so what I can tell you is rosemary, or the molecule that's present, or one of the molecules present in rosemary, impacts the splicing of the ELP1 transcript. And so this is a picture that now you're familiar with. This is the picture in which you can see what the normal pattern is in one that has familial dysautonomia, where the majority of the product is missing the exon 20 sequence. And only a small amount of it has the exon 20. And so what does rosemary do when you use it when you place it on cells of individuals with familial dysautonomia? You get this much increased amount of the 269 base pair product, which is the functional product in these cells. Now, rosemary contains several interesting molecules. The one that we have focused on primarily is Carnosol. This is Carnosol. Again, you can see the ratio in the untreated, which is the 0 point, where the majority of the material is lacking exon 20. And what you can see is as one treats the cell with increasing amounts of Carnosol, you get a dramatic shift to the upper form, the form that contains exon 20. And so when we do the math on this, what we find is now 96.8% of the product that's being made is being made properly, and it contains the exon 20 sequence. So if we go look at our picture as we've been looking at them in the past, what you can see here is that instead of there being 20% being made, which contains exon 20, and 80% which is truncated, actually 96% of the material contains the properly spliced together or properly assembled gene product, and only 4% is the truncated. So this is a very, very dramatic, and really the most dramatic of all of the compounds that we have found to date. I mentioned to you that the tocotrienols impacts the level of the ELP1, which is very interesting. Now I'm going to show you that not only does rosemary and carnosol impact the splicing of ELP1, it also impacts the level of expression. So this is the 1x expression when you treat, and I just showed you that when you treat with carnosol, you get 96% of the correct and only 4% of the truncated. Well, one of the amazing things about carnosol is it dials up the level of expression of this so that you now have 2.5-fold the normal amount. And now you can see how robust it is, the green molecules, the functional molecules. So this has been very dramatic. You still have the same ratio of 96:4, but you have so many more of the functional green molecules being produced. And this can be seen actually in this experiment, which I just want to show you. This was done in normal cells. And what's happening here is that this is your 0, the untreated. This is the treated with 30 micromolar of the carnosol. And you can see how it dramatically increases the production or the level at which this gene product is being made. So the carnosol and the rosemary are doing two things. They are the first correcting the splicing so that the primary product that you're getting is a normal functional product, and they're also increasing the rate at which the product is being produced. Now, this is all fine and dandy. We were doing our experiments mostly in skin cells from individuals with familial dysautonomia, but we all know that familial dysautonomia is a genetic disorder that affects the development and survival of nerve or neuronal cells. So Dr. Anderson generated a model where we could evaluate the impact of carnosol and rosemary in neuronal cells or nerve cells. And we did this experiment, and what you can see is actually there is a 900% increase in the amount of the functional ELP1 product that's produced in these neuronal cells. So it was important for us to demonstrate that the effect that we were observing was not going to be limited to skin cells, but would be occurring also in neuronal cells. There is also data out there which says that carnosol goes through the blood-brain barrier and reaches the brain of animals in which it's been studied. So the likelihood is that this effect will impact the central nervous system of individuals with familial dysautonomia. So obviously, the goal of our lab is to find things that can be taken without concerns of toxicity and are readily available to the FD patient population. There have been numerous studies that have been done on the health benefits and the potential risks of ingesting various spices and so on and so forth. And the Food and Drug Administration has indicated that rosemary is a substance that's generally recognized as safe. And there have been numerous studies that have been done to demonstrate that it is a safe product to ingest. It's obviously in many of our cupboards as a spice. So we, after much analysis, we settled on this product, which is available, which has in it, it is standardized to have 20% carnosol in it. And this is the product that we are studying. And what we did is, as our initial study is, we asked the question, what would happen in individuals, healthy individuals, not individuals with FD, who would take rosemary? And what you can see here is this is the amount that's present before. One is the amount that's present before we were taking the rosemary. And then this was 14 days after taking this product. The question is, how much ELP1, functional ELP1, could we find in our blood? And what you can see is 3 individuals participated in this study. One had 184%, one had 211% of the starting amount, and one had 136% of the starting amount, this is very dramatic. And you have to remember that there is no effect here on the splicing because these individuals have the normal splicing. This is just how fast the body is now producing this ELP1 transcript or ELP1 product. And as you can see, it's having a dramatic effect even in healthy individuals. Now, familial dysautonomia is characterized by a loss in severe and progressive sympathetic and sensory nerve loss. So this is a characteristic of FD. There is a loss of neuronal function over time. And so one of the things that we noticed about in our studies of Carnosol and rosemary is that it significantly elevates the level of nerve growth factor produced by cells. So I entitled this slide, 2 Wonderful Side Effects of Rosemary Extract, which contain carnosol and carnosic acid. And one of the things that I'm pointing out is significantly elevates the level of nerve growth factor produced by cells. And the level that it increases it is multiple fold. So what is the benefit of increasing nerve growth factor in one with familial dysautonomia, which is what I'm going to discuss first. And then I'll come back to the anti-osteoporosis agent later. So nerve growth factor promotes the corneal healing in rat and human corneas. So you have corneal healing, and everybody who interacts with an individual with familial dysautonomia knows that dry corneas and damaged corneas is a normal part of their lives. Well, nerve growth factor promotes the healing of corneas. Most of those studies have been done by putting drops with nerve growth factor into the eyes. What we're doing, what we expect that we're doing, is increasing the circulating level of nerve growth factor. In this article, they conclude, is taken together, the above findings show that nerve growth factor plays an important role in corneal physiopathology and suggest that this neurotrophin, which is nerve growth factor, may exert therapeutic action in a wide spectrum of corneal disease, which is something which would be very beneficial for those with familial dysautonomia. There are also some amazing studies on the benefits of nerve growth factor. There are studies that are looking at nerve growth factor for the treatment of Alzheimer's disease and for age-related macular degeneration. And this is a report that came out in 2015 that just talked about the activities of nerve growth factor. And I've highlighted some of the information here. So you can see here, one of the things is that the survival of the nerve growth factor plays a role in promoting the survival of peripheral nerve cells. And in degenerative disorders of the central nervous system, what they found is that there's a reduced presence. There's not enough synthesis or release of nerve growth factor. So what we're doing is we're providing this additional nerve growth factor for in the bodies of those, or we expect we'll be providing additional nerve growth factor in the bodies of those who are taking the rosemary extract. There have been studies that have been performed in humans that reveal that rosemary extract improves memory. It improves both long-term memory, short-term memory, reduced anxiety. It treats depression and improves sleep quality. And then there's the other aspect. There is literature which says that rosemary serves as an anti-osteoporosis agent, which is, again, an important feature for those with familial dysautonomia, because one of the characteristics of the disease is they develop osteopenia, which eventually develops into osteoporosis, which can be very debilitating to those with FD. And so there is a report in the literature that says that rosemary, the impact of thyme and rosemary on prevention of osteoporosis in rats. It turns out that thyme as well as rosemary both contain carnosol. And so this publication intrigued us, and we wondered whether we would see a benefit in those with familial dysautonomia with regards to their bone density. And so we have begun a very small clinical study a while ago in individuals with familial dysautonomia to see what the reaction is in those individuals. And that study is currently underway. But as it turns out, one of those individuals was scheduled for a bone density analysis. And so I want to show you the results of that bone density analysis. This is just one individual. With time, we will collect that on other individuals, but I just want to show you this because the effect is very dramatic. So what you're seeing here is different dates at which the analysis was done. The first was done in 2017, and then in 2019, and then in 2022. The bone density, bone mineral density in 2017 was 0.793. And as would be expected, as osteopenia develops into osteoporosis, there is a reduction from 793 to 768. This next one was done on 4/25/2022. This individual was on the rosemary for several months at this point. And what you can see is that it went from 768 to 0.768 to 0.826, which is a very substantial increase in the bone density, a 7.6% increase. It was asterisk. It was seen as being very significant. And in fact, the analysis now reports that the hip of this individual is no longer osteopenic, bordering on osteoporotic, but is actually totally normal. So our future plans include to expand the clinical evaluation of the impact of rosemary extract on individuals with FD. And we've learned a lot about the control of the production of the ELP1 gene product as a function of these studies. So we're going to utilize the biochemical pathways demonstrated to mediate the Carnosol mediated effect on LP to identify additional LP1 inducing compounds and identify commonly consumed items that reduce the cellular presence of LP1. So we've now figured out a way that we can screen compounds for their positive effect on those with familial dysautonomia, and potentially also those compounds which may have a negative effect on the level of expression of LP1. I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon. I hope you found the information to be helpful. I hope I wasn't too scientific-y, and I would again like to acknowledge the FD Now directors who have worked tirelessly to keep the lab functioning, and I would very much like to acknowledge Dr. Sylvia Anderson, who again works tirelessly to make the lives of those with FD so much better. Thank you so much. Dr. Anderson, are there any questions in the Q&A that you would like me to address?
Yes, there's a number of questions actually. So people are really thinking hard about what you said, and they have some interesting questions. So I'll start with one. Can rosemary replace everything that an FD, somebody with FD is already taking? In other words, can they eliminate all the other supplements and take rosemary only?
So that's a very good question, and it's a very difficult one to answer at this point, not having done an extensive clinical trial with rosemary. Rosemary has a tremendous amount of potential. With time, it is possible that we will determine whether it is sufficient to do all of the things that all of the other compounds are capable of doing. But at this point, since it is a benign, commonly consumed item, my recommendation is that it be taken along with all of the other items that they are taking as a therapeutic.
Okay, here's another question. How do the capsules differ from the rosemary in my spice cabinet?
It's a good question. Right. So the capsules, and I'm looking for one on my desk, which I don't have. The capsules are a extract which is prepared with a focus on making sure that it has a particular carnosol content. And so it is prepared in such a way to effectively extract so that it is available for the body to absorb. Rosemary that is present in your cabinet will contain carnosol, but the amount will be uncontrolled. And so, yes, you can use rosemary liberally for your children with familial dysautonomia, but it is not a replacement for the product that we are recommending.
Okay, so here's another question. how often do you test the rosemary capsules for quality control?
So one of the things that we have taken on the responsibility is to constantly test the quality of the products that we recommend to the patient population. And so every lot of, for example, tocotrienol that gets released to the public is first analyzed by us so that it meets our standards. The same is true for the green tea 70. And we have been testing numerous lots and continue to test numerous lots of the rosemary extract. And so far, every single lot that we have tested has passed our quality control.
Okay, boy, the questions are coming in. So I will continue here. Will there be clinical trials of Carnosol in the rosemary extract for the FD population?
So we have a small clinical trial which is now underway. Depending on how this trial proceeds, we will make a decision as to whether we will expand it. But there is currently a clinical trial that we are currently doing where we are evaluating the impact of the ELP or impact of rosemary on the ELP1 transcript and on the pathophysiology of those with familial dysautonomia.
Okay, I'm not stopping yet. There's still more questions coming in. Good. So this person asks, how does the speed of production of ELP1 vary in response to Carnosol? I don't know if they mean in different people, but that could be what they mean.
So we produce our gene products at a certain level. And what the tocotrienols has done is just ramped up, and I'm not going to get into the science of promoters and molecules that bind to promoters, but basically, if you think of it as a car, if the car is going 20 miles an hour, which is the normal amount, what the tocotrienols is doing is racing the car to a much higher level, let's say to 60 miles an hour, so that you're covering more distance, or in this case, producing more ELP1 over that period of time. So that is what the tocotrienols are doing. The Carnosol is doing the same thing. It is elevating the level of expression so that not only are you getting the benefits associated with the splicing effect of the Carnosol, you are also getting the elevated level of the transcripts that are produced by the gene, the ELP1 gene.
Okay. You're doing very well answering the question.
Thank you.
Somebody asked, is there a cumulative effect of the tocos and green tea with the rosemary? So,
is there a synergism, I guess, is really what the question is. So if we treat cells with tocotrienols and we treat the cells with green tea and we treat the cells with rosemary, do we see an elevated production? The answer to that is yes. But that is experiments that we've done in the laboratory. That does not tell me what's happening in individuals. I should say that the individuals that we are currently doing the clinical study with are individuals who are currently taking tocotrienols and green tea. So we may get a good picture of what is occurring in those individuals in vivo.
okay, here's a good question. Somebody asked, does Carnosol actually reach the brain? Or do you know that?
Well, so I don't know that in humans. There have been extensive studies been done in animals that have demonstrated that, yes, it does in fact reach the brain, which is a very good question, because if it doesn't, even if it doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier, it will impact the nervous system where it can reach it. But there is clear evidence that Carnosol does in fact cross the blood-brain barrier, but not in humans. Those studies have been done in animals.
I'm getting near the end of my questions, so if you have questions, put them in now. Okay, so another question. How will tocos, green tea, and rosemary extract, I'm not quite sure what the person's asking, but how will tocos, green tea, and rosemary extract, what will they do in the body of a non-FD person if they take them regularly?
It's a very good question. I don't have the answer to that. You know, there is data out there that says that green tea is an anti-cancer agent in humans. There isn't a lot of studies. There are not a lot of studies that deal with tocotrienols in humans. There is a significant amount of data on rosemary in humans. Clearly, there's accumulating data that it has an anti-osteoporosis effect. It has an ability to boost memory and so on and so forth. So I have as yet not started taking rosemary myself. I've been on it and off it as the experiments in the laboratory have mandated, but there is no downside. And I believe there could be significant upside. Whether the significant upside results in a delay of macular degeneration or a delay in Alzheimer's or just a delay in a loss of neuronal function over time or a osteoporosis, anti-osteoporosis benefit, I think will take time. And if somebody is thinking of, for example, of taking rosemary, I would encourage them to consider that.
Okay. Okay, now this person has given permission for me to give a couple personal details about their child with FD. The child is 13, but has a bone age of 8. Will rosemary help?
So all individuals with familial dysautonomia have a delayed maturation on a lot of different levels. And the reduced bone age is only a temporary issue. The bone age will eventually catch up with the chronological age. So this is not something I'd be concerned about. The bone age is something that they look at when they want to know what the growth potential is of that individual. So I would not tie that at all to the effects of rosemary, and I would not see the delayed bone age as being something that's negative. It's just one of the phenomenon. Individuals with familial dysautonomia tend to mature and go through puberty and develop appropriate bone age later than other individuals. So this doesn't really impact, it's not really impacted by rosemary. And it's not something I would be at all concerned about.
Okay, now here's 2 questions that are from different people that are related. One person asked what the dosage will be, and the other one asked, so this is something that people are concerned about. Will 1 be effective, or will we be giving the kids 2 a day?
Okay, so it's a very good question. At this point, the clinical study that we're doing is based on 1 capsule for those individuals with familial dysautonomia. And the clinical study that was done in the non-FD individuals that was presented in the paper was done with 1 capsule for those individuals. And those individuals weighed different amounts, and those all had a response. The person who had a slightly lower response was not any bigger or smaller than the other individuals. So we're recommending that it be taken at the dose that's recommended by the manufacturer at this point. With time, if we see that the response is not as robust as we would like, we will consider entering into a clinical study where we will increase the amount that is being taken. I can tell you that some of the people who were initially informed of the effects of rosemary have opted to increase the amount that they're taking above the 1 capsule a day. They are reporting a significant benefit, but this is anecdotal. And the only way to know whether it's real or not is for us to do a real clinical study, which we will do at some point if we find that 1 capsule is not sufficient to reach the levels that we would like to reach in these individuals.
And also the safety profile of rosemary that probably almost everybody takes in already is a pretty good sign that if and when the dose you recommend a higher dose, that it will be a safe thing to do.
So thank you. There's a very, very well done, very elaborate study that was done in animals where they gave them tens of grams of rosemary per body weight, and saw no toxicity whatsoever. It was an extensive study that was done because people really want to know how high you can go with rosemary without impacting the health of the animals in which they did the studies, and there was no negative impact observed. It's quite from those studies, it would seem to be really safe to take at high doses. I'd like to just point out something that, and this is something that I've been thinking about just in general. If one looks at places, which is an interesting observation, if you look at places in which rosemary is commonly used as a spice, if you look at a map and the incidence of osteoporosis in those areas, now there could be a lot of different explanations, but there is an association between countries that use a great deal of rosemary as part of their diets and the lower incidence of osteoporosis in those areas. So it is an interesting observation. Again, we'll have some real data on this at some point in the future.
Okay, this question is specific to someone with FD close to 50 years old. And the questioner asks, how will this affect an older person close to 50?
It's a good question. It's interesting because we have seen a health benefit with all of the other items that we have introduced in all age groups. The younger the person is when they started on some of these therapeutics, the more they benefited from it. So there are individuals that benefited from or started taking the tocotrienols and the green tea, et cetera, from when they were infants. And those individuals basically are the same as they were when they were born. They do not manifest the typical FD signs. But that's not to say that individuals who are older didn't benefit. I have individuals who are older who benefited significantly, increased tear production, increased sensitivity to pain, and so on and so forth. So while the neuronal loss that will have occurred in these individuals in the older individuals is not likely to be reversed, though I don't know what the increased nerve growth factor may have on those individuals. What I would say is that my expectation is that their condition should remain stable or improve, even if they are 50 years old when they start taking rosemary or any of the other compounds that we have been recommending.
Okay, here's one more question about safety. What sort of signs or side effects can rosemary have so we should know what to look for and stop taking it?
No, nobody's demonstrated any negative side effects of taking rosemary, so I can't answer that question. I mean, there is no data on there that demonstrates any level of toxicity associated with whatever doses have been taken. So I don't know if there is any. And if somebody does perceive something that is occurring as a function of taking this, they should please let me know. Clearly, the healthy individuals who are included in the study and the individuals who are currently in our clinical study do not report any kind of negative effect whatsoever. And some individuals that are aware of the data that we have generated are taking not a single capsule, but more than one capsule a day. And I have not heard any negative effects whatsoever.
Okay. This is an interesting question. How would the rosemary, does it affect what foods an FD patient can consume?
It's a very good question. I don't know the answer to that yet. So the question is there are certain foods that individuals with FD need to avoid because of their high tyramine content. We have shown in a previous study that as we increase the levels of ELP1, we increase the ability of the cells to process tyramine. Now, whether this will increase the levels of ELP1 to such a level that the dietary restrictions can be relaxed, I do not know. It is too early to know that.
Okay. Another question. Does the testing that we've done with FD patients already show benefits for the patients?
I'm going to, I don't want to release that information until such time as that I have real statistically significant data. So I'm not going to, it's too early for me to be able to answer that question at this point. So I apologize. At some point we will have that data, but I don't want to report anecdotal data at this point.
Okay. Will the supplements, I assume, probably asking specifically about the rosemary or maybe the combination, stop degeneration and not reverse it?
So what we have seen in individuals that have been taking the compounds is that their neuronal function remains stable and is not lost. The optic nerve, which is one of the things that people keep track of in this patient population who has been taking the various items that we have discovered, have remained stable, which is an indication that neuronal function continues to be stable in these individuals. Whether the rosemary may be able to reverse that, maybe not as a function of its effect on ELP1, but maybe as a function of the increased production of nerve growth factor, just will take time to determine.
Okay, here's boy, the questions did keep coming in. I'm really impressed with the thoughtful questions everybody's providing. So here's another one. Will Carnosol help with common stomach issues or weight gain and muscle issues found in FD?
I cannot tell you that yet, because all I can tell you at this point is that it increases ELP1 levels. The clinical studies will provide further information on the physiological responses in those with familial dysautonomia.
Okay, now here's a very important and good question. How important is it to take the brand you recommend? Can I find rosemary extract in my health food store with the same percentage?
I'll answer this question by telling a little bit of a story, if I may, which is there was an individual who was responding very nicely to the tocotrienols early on, and then I received a call from the mom saying the child is no longer responding to the tocotrienols. And after a conversation that took place, it turned out that they had switched to another brand. I won't tell you which brand. And then we went out and bought that brand, and it turns out that the level of tocotrienols in the pills was 1/10 of the concentration that they reported it to be. So we are testing the Nature Restore product on a regular basis. So I am not testing other products, so I cannot tell you whether another product will have the same biological impact as the Nature Restore. But my experience has been is that there's a great variation in the quality of the products produced. For example, the tocotrienols that we recommend they meet our standard, and they know that they need to meet our standard on a regular basis. The same is true for the green tea. And the only one that we have been able to test and certify that continues to meet our standards at this point is the Nature Restore product. So I would encourage people to go with the product that we're recommending.
And I might add too, we did send out some lots of the Nature Restore product to a company that does extensive chemical testing, and we asked them to test for carnosol and carnoxic acid levels. And they were exactly as the manufacturer said, and the different lots were identical. So they obviously have very good quality control. And any lots that I've used in the lab have all given the same results. So we are quite confident in the Nature Restore brand.
And we will continue.
That's the one to use.
And we will continue, and we continue to send out for analysis and to do our own analysis on all of the products to make sure that they meet our standards.
And we should also remind people that nutritional supplements in general are not regulated. So unless you do testing, and when you go to a health food store, you have no idea how extensive any product has been tested. Unless you do the testing, like we did, you're not going to know exactly what you're getting when you buy a random product in a health food store. Okay, this is actually the last question. In what way do taking tocos and rosemary, how will they improve the body and lives of FD kids and adults?
Well, I can tell you from a physiological point of view, the tocotrienols increases the level of ELP1, and we have seen and reported in the literature an improvement in terms of their cardiac function. And an investigator in the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia has reported that the response in individuals who are taking the tocotrienols and green tea to anesthesia is completely different than in those with FD who are not taking those. And so there is a clear physiological benefit of taking those items and the various items that we have recommended. I don't have anything yet to say about the physiology of the rosemary. The data that we have on the healthy individuals clearly demonstrates that it increases ELP1 levels, but I cannot speak yet about the physiological impact of the consumption of rosemary.
Well, somebody just put in a new question. Good. Will rosemary and tocos stop the retching and coughing in the morning by FD kids?
The person who asked that question needs to have a conversation with me and gave out my email address, because the retching and the nausea and the stomach discomfort is something that we now know how to deal with. So I would encourage that person to reach out to me and have that conversation. The individuals who have been in conversation with me know how to avoid that. And while the tocotrienols and the green tea and the other things help with regards to this, there is a very simple solution to that problem. And please, you can reach out to me at Rubin, R-U-B-I-N, at fordham.edu.
So that's the end of the questions. I'm just amazed by how many questions there were and how thoughtful and good those questions were. So I think that helped everybody to hear the answers to the questions.
Well, thank you, Drs. Rubin and Anderson, for all you do on behalf of those with FD. Our children would not be where they are today without you. We are so grateful for this new discovery, and we are looking forward to the next one that is in the pipeline. Thanks to all the attendees who have joined us today from around the world. As president of FD Now, it has been our pleasure to host this informative talk. Please go to fdnow.org for a complete list of all the FD treatments. And everybody have a wonderful day or night, depending on where you live.